якщо там є Всевишній. За що це все? Для чого? Двохлітня дитина, яка в житті не бачила, пострадала ні за що. Мама його називала поцілуйчиком. Під нікому.
We had, of course, white flags, and we met Russian tank, and so we drive slowly. So they shouldn't shoot us, but machine gun, heavy machine gun on tank, DSHK, probably you know. They shot our car. First they killed my dad, and then my mom escaped from this car, and I was sitting inside with my sister. I screamed that we're civilians, don't shoot, but they still shooting at us. Then she killed her.
From above, Mariupol looks like it's had the life sucked out of it. People's homes, now frozen in time, eerie carcasses of war. And on the ground, even the dead get no peace. It's too dangerous to bury them in the cemetery, often lying outside for days. Those left alive can't make sense of this war.
My mother-in-law, born in 1936, she survived the Leningrad siege, Russian passport, honored worker of Russian Federation's fishing industry. There she is, lying.
Those killed in the bombardment are being buried in the grounds of their homes, something they never would have imagined while living here.
It's disgusting. I'm not going to blame anyone. I'm disgusted, I'm scared, and I'm cold. It's a horror. I have never expected this to happen in my life.
This video has been uploaded by the Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov, fighting for Russia, claiming this is an attempt to evacuate civilians. But most efforts to evacuate civilians from here have so far failed. For 3 weeks, Russia has assaulted this strategic port city. Tens of thousands are trapped here, and nothing functions anymore.
We spent 2 days in the basement. She's a sick woman who had to sit on a chair all that time. I thought she wouldn't survive. Then the men came and helped to carry her out, so we are here, all bundled up with blankets. It's very cold. We just want to go home.
Young faces still manage a smile in these unimaginable times. Everything is going to be okay, she tells her children. It will end soon. Vladimir Putin says Russian forces are not targeting civilians. The ground, the reality, tells a very different story.
A city under siege as Russian forces intensify their attacks. What's left of neighborhoods in Mariupol are shattered homes and buildings. Across the port city, scattered bodies lay out on the street, scenes of the worst war can do. Cars now line the streets as people try to flee. Checkpoints make sure only civilians leave.
I got out of the city's central district with bombings and destruction. We lost our house, so now we're leaving with our children. We're still in shock and fearful.
Russian forces charged into the port city, a place where weeks of shelling had kept about 400,000 people hostage. Local authorities say Moscow's attacks have cut electricity supplies, heating, and water. Russia denies it's targeting civilians.
Yeah, he freed us from education.
But airstrikes have hit civilian infrastructure like the city's school, and recently a theater where people were taking refuge from bombings. Amid those ravaged neighborhoods, survivors say life will never be the same. A makeshift kitchen is all that's left of this woman's home, and some no longer have the energy or will to leave.
Why leave the city now after what we've been through? We've had difficult days with bombings, hunger, and cold weather. As you can see, our neighborhood is destroyed.
As old lives are left behind, some have found shelter in local schools, with another humanitarian crisis unfolding.
As you mentioned, Elaine, they have stalled in certain parts of the country, but there are some areas that we are monitoring closely. Let's start with the capital city of Kyiv, right here. This is where the Ukrainian military says that they have launched a successful attack against Russian troops up in the northwest that has led to mass casualties. Now, over here in Kharkiv, one of the areas that's been hit incredibly hard by Russian shelling, the Russian military still has not been able to take over the city, which is ultimately the goal there. Down here in Mariupol, the site of that ongoing humanitarian crisis, the Russian military has been closing in on the city, but they are also using civilian targets more and more frequently. A very, very precarious situation right there. Now, there are two numbers that I want to point out right now. The UN estimates more than 700 civilians have been killed, 7,000 Russian troops reportedly killed as well in the conflict. Experts fear that those numbers could both be much higher.
Within minutes of early morning air raid sirens throughout the city, Russian missiles hit targets near Lviv International Airport, shattering once again the sense of relative safety here in the west of Ukraine.
Air raid warning system worked. I'm grateful to the armed forces as they reacted. Some missiles which were launched from the Black Sea area were intercepted. 4 missiles hit an aircraft repair plant, as you already know.
There have been some attacks in this part of the country, a training camp in Yavoriv last week, and a military post at an airfield near Lutsk. But the Friday morning airport strike is the closest the war has come to the city of Lviv so far. As you see behind me, smoke is still rising from the area that was hit. We've been stopped from going any further, any closer to the areas that were hit by these strikes. Police have pushed us back twice. We've tried to go over the bridge, but we've been sent back to this area here. So we can't get a clear view of what's happening, but the smoke that continues to billow over the skies, over the city, certainly tells you that something definitely was hit and is still on fire. In the eastern city of Kharkiv, a college building was shelled, killing 1 person, injuring 11, and trapping another in the rubble. The city is home to one of the largest markets in Eastern Europe, and it remains on fire, sparked by shelling on Thursday. Another shelling in Kramatorsk killed 2 and injured 6. And the capital also attacked. The mayor of Kyiv visited a nursery and school he says was targeted by Russian rockets, killing 1 child and wounding 23.
This is genocide of the Ukrainian population. You have to act now. Stop passively observing and stop doing business with Russia. Do it now.
Attacking mostly civilian targets is proof, Ukrainian officials say, that Russia is choosing not to fight Ukrainian troops, instead hitting the country's most vulnerable.
Enemies' strike against the city of Lviv is another proof that it does not fight Ukrainian troops. It fights population, children, women, refugees. There is nothing sacred for them.
And James Andre is back in Kyiv and joins us now live. James, good afternoon. What was really striking in that report when I first saw it was really how upbeat the soldiers you saw actually were.
Yes, absolutely. Soldiers are upbeat, and there's a good reason to that, and that is the fact that their weapon systems for now are being incredibly effective. A lot of soldiers told us about that famous video, because it is now famous, of that column of tanks that was pushed back. That was around Brovary. That was earlier on this week, when indeed these tanks came under heavy shelling by the Ukrainian forces, were hit by these anti-tank missiles and force to retreat, and that was quite chaotic. Now, a lot of people have seen these videos and they all feel empowered to manage to hold this defense line. Now, I heard this morning that this defense line was actually 16 kilometers long. What we see in that report is only just a few hundred meters of it, but the armed forces of Ukraine have been working really hard to entrench themselves to defend the capital city, and they're doing a remarkable job, it has to be said. We also witnessed how a lot of volunteers are helping the soldiers out. We saw a man arrive with some food, another group of people arriving with plywood and beams in order to create new shelters, new bunkers in order to fortify that line and to be able to hold it if indeed Russian tanks come back and try and force it. And that's for now not what we're seeing on the ground.
James, help us with the big picture. It appears that right now around Kyiv, Ukrainian defenses are actually holding steady.
For now, indeed, the defenses are holding, both on the northeastern side, that is on the side of Brovary, where indeed for now, well, the Russian tanks have not managed to crush through Ukrainian defenses, and it's the same on the northwestern side in Irpin, where there has been a lot of tension over the past few days, where there have been Russian advances, but according to media here, there's been a pushback by the Ukrainian forces, and for now, there again, the Russian tanks are not managing to enter Kiev itself. Now, what there has been in Kiev, though, is some shelling. This morning, a building was hit in Podil, that is in central Kiev. That is an upmarket district, and there, well, a flat was destroyed on the 16th floor. One person was killed, 19 people were injured. So there is also that constant psychological pressure here in central Kyiv.
It might not look like it, but these people are providing a vital service. Without any external funding, Anya and her friends deliver groceries and basic goods to some of the most vulnerable in Kyiv. Some of the goods are donated, but most are paid for by the volunteers themselves.
I always wanted to do humanitarian work. I don't have grandparents, so this helps me compensate for that. It really comes from my heart.
Maria rarely leaves the house. She's too frail to make the journey, and the elevator in her building is best described as temperamental. She stayed in the city because she says she has no family to go to. Without the volunteers, she'd be completely alone and hungry.
I was in hospital with heart problems, and my daughter died recently. I have a niece who could help, but public transport is shut, so she can't get here. Right now, I don't need anything, because they brought me things, but this won't last long.
The volunteers work under the umbrella of an organization called Love Life, which existed before the war to help the homeless and vulnerable. Now it's one of the only organizations of its kind in Ukraine still operating, and demand for its services far outstrips its capacity. To cope, the organization has changed the way it operates. It identifies the most vulnerable people and posts them on a private social media channel. Volunteers then make the deliveries, navigating the city's many checkpoints and anti-tank barricades. And it's not just home delivery. Kitchens and roadside kiosks have also become a front line of sorts in the war effort. Most of the restaurants across the city are shut, but the kitchens are open and the chefs are working. Now, they might not be making their usual cuisines. What they're doing is they're making home-style cuisines that then volunteers pick up and bring to distribution points like these. And it is a lifeline for many. This might be the one hot meal that they get a day.
Queuing to get into a charity rap concert in Istanbul's Kadıköy district. Hundreds of Russians here united in showing their opposition to their country's war in Ukraine and support for the Ukrainian fight to stop the invasion. Most of them are young and well-educated Russians.
If you write war in your Instagram or Facebook, you can go to the jail, yeah.
Others say they were arrested for joining anti-war protests in cities back home.
Not long time before I got arrested because I took part in some rallies, and I got fired.
Also in Istanbul is Alisa Zayseva. The Russian activist left Moscow 2 weeks ago to cram her life into the small room in a hostel. She has a Russian passport, but half of her family is Ukrainian. Like many of her peers, she was born after Russian President Vladimir Putin was elected.
We never chose him. We literally had votes rights just a couple of years ago. We never voted for this government. People feel guilty, like young generation, that they trying to do something, but it's impossible and it's dangerous.
But living in Turkey means many challenges lie ahead. The Russian anti-war newcomers need a life to settle, housing, money. Due to the crippling international sanctions, their credit cards don't work. Most have no plan.
It's pretty nice and clean, and it's good enough to accommodate.
Eva Rappaport is an anthropology researcher who left Russia 9 years ago. She's been in Istanbul for nearly 2 years and stayed out of politics. But now she helps other Russians who fled to get a roof over their heads.
I cannot go on and do my regular daily routines when something like so unjust and like so uncalled for is happening.
Others in self-exile fear for the future and Putin's potential revenge.
When he turns back from the war, he will turn his eyes to the people that did not support his actions, and that will be war inside.
As well as Russians, some Ukrainians also ended up in Istanbul. Yurik is married to a Russian in Kazan, but felt he wasn't safe there, or in his hometown, Kiev either.
It's really sad that Russian people, they worry about their economy when our people die.
Turkey is one of the easier destinations to escape to for Russians who are against war. But even if fighting in Ukraine ends soon, Russians may face 15-year prison sentence if they return home because of their social media posts and their opposition to the invasion.
Medica on the border between Poland and Ukraine. Every day hundreds continue to arrive here, mainly women, children and elderly people. These refugees have two choices. Either go to a warehouse transformed into an emergency shelter, here we're not allowed to film, or they can continue on to Przemysl, the neighboring town, from where they can leave for other destinations. Since the beginning of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, up to 50,000 people have been arriving here every day.
A lot of refugees here have family, friends in the other part of Poland, other part of Europe, and they know when they want to go. So after 1 or 2 days, they are organized a transport to family or others, or if they have a place where they want, Przemysl with other organizing.
Further north, Budomierz is a quieter border crossing. Here, each refugee is registered by the International Organization for Migration, and the reception system is financed by the Polish authorities.
Tutaj państwo polskie zabezpiecza środki na funkcjonowanie takich miejsc.
The Polish government is funding such places and covers their everyday costs, as well as the running of reception and emergency centers. Communities receive financial support for all that, but of course, they're also supported by Polish and European cities. And we use this support to fix meals and prepare care packages for further travel.
Poland has provided a huge humanitarian effort over the past 3 weeks. Faced with this emergency, the country keeps on helping those crossing the border. But for how much longer? Also, the government has released 1.6 billion euros to respond to this exceptional situation. But many questions persist over what will happen in the weeks, in the months to come.
From the streets of Mariupol, the sounds of fierce fighting, and also a voice of defiance. A Ukrainian fighter appeals directly to the presidents of the US and France for air defense systems.
You have promised there'll be help. Give us that help. Save the civilian population. Children, elderly people are dying.
He finishes by comparing their plight to the Syrian city of Aleppo. With much of Mariupol lying in ruins and completely surrounded by superior forces, Ukraine says there is little it can do militarily.
No army in the world will be able to cross it, not even the US Army, with the size of the forces we have now, unfortunately.
Using one of a number of humanitarian corridors operating in the country, an exodus of people has continued, telling the same harrowing tale.
There is no Mariupol. We sat in the cellar for 10 days and didn't leave once.
At this destroyed army base in the southern city of Mykolaiv, another search for survivors there. There's been a new appeal from Ukraine's president to end the war through dialogue.
I want everyone to hear me, especially in Moscow. The time has come to meet, to talk.
And as this war grinds on, there's been the competing claims of progress by both sides. The Ukrainians say they've been mounting counterattacks and have stopped Russian forces surrounding the capital, Kyiv. For its part, Russia says it has used a new type of missile with an attack on an installation in the west of the country.
Hypersonic ballistic missiles destroyed a big underground missile arsenal along with aerial munitions of the Ukrainian forces.
The Ukrainians say overstretched Russian forces are bogged down in much of the country and have resorted to using badly trained recruits in the fight. The Russians have released combat footage showing that, on the contrary, it's the Ukrainians who are on the receiving end.
Aftermath of the latest missile to slam into a residential neighborhood here this morning. There's no telling when or where the next rocket or rockets will strike. Kyiv, the second largest city, engulfed in flames and under constant bombardment. And in the besieged city of Chernihiv, an American teacher among dozens of Ukrainian civilians killed. 68-year-old Jimmy Hill, who had stayed in Ukraine to look after his partner Irina, suffering from MS. From Pittsburgh, Katya Hill recalled the last time she spoke with her brother.
I could hear bombs in the background. He was going out on a daily basis searching for food. The hospital lost electricity. The hospital lost gas. There was no heat. My brother was a peacemaker, and he was a giver, and he just felt everybody in the world should love each other.
A man weeps over the body of his dead mother in the capital, killed after fragments of a downed missile rained down on this neighborhood. This is what it looks like when a missile misses. People pick up the pieces, patiently lining up for plastic sheeting, protection against the cold, if not searing shrapnel. These are some of the fragments of the missile that the Ukrainian military said it intercepted as it flew overhead. And it caused incredible destruction at this building and surrounding buildings. You can see why people are so worried about what may come. Even though this neighborhood is in the firing line, even as Gayla Vereshchak plucks jagged shards of glass from her window, she tells us she's not going anywhere. It's very cold. It's okay, we won't freeze, she says. Love warms us up.
This was a powerful show of patriotism. In Moscow, Russia's biggest stadium was filled to its 81,000 capacity to celebrate 8 years since the annexation of Crimea, or as it's called here, the reunification. And everywhere the Z, the sign that first appeared on Russian military vehicles in Ukraine and has now become a symbol of support for Russia's war there. It was a stage set for Vladimir Putin, who told the crowd that the United States is using Ukraine to threaten Russia. He said the soldiers fighting there illustrated Russian unity.
Shoulder to shoulder, they help each other, support each other. And when needed, they shield each other from bullets with their bodies like brothers. Such unity we have not had for a long time.
A survey after the first week of the war showed that what the Kremlin calls its special operation in Ukraine was supported by 58% of Russians. There have been attempts to protest against the war, but they are quickly, often brutally suppressed. But others are finding ways to voice their opposition, such as this art group called Party of the Dead, protesting somewhere in Russia.
We are practically living on a war footing. There's no way for it not to affect us anymore. We have to fight this war and those who are stoking it, keeping it going, and are prepared to take it to some catastrophic finale.
That show of dissent won't get covered by Russian television. But Friday's flag waving in Moscow and other cities will, though you won't hear that Ukraine says it's fighting for its survival or that the West dismisses accusations that it wants to rip Russia apart. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
Put a barrier to neo-Nazis and extreme nationalists, because what is happening in other territories is the confirmation to that. The people living in Donbass also did not agree to this coup. Against them, punishing operations was started. They were shelled by guns and aviation. This is all that is called genocide. And to rid people of this suffering and genocide is the main reason and purpose of our military operation, which we started in Donbass and Ukraine. This is exactly our purpose. So I remember the words from the Saint book. There is no more love, more than if someone gives a soul for their friends, for his friends. And we can see that heroically our guys fight during this operation. These words from the sacred book of Christianity, from what is dear to those who have faith in this religion. But this is a universal value for all the peoples and all the religions in Russia, and especially for our people. And the best confirmation is the fact how our guys are fighting during this operation shoulder to shoulder. They support each other. If needed, they cover with their own body, cover in the battlefield. We haven't had this unity for a long time. It happened so that the beginning of this operation coincided.
To rid people of suffering and genocide, that was the reason we just heard from Vladimir Putin. He said for the military operations, as he put it, in Donbass in Ukraine. He went on to refer to religious texts, saying he was quoting from, as he put it, the sacred book of Christianity, saying there is no greater love than to give your soul for your friend. That is, of course, going on at a concert which has been called to mark the day when Russia integrated Crimea into the Russian Federation, which came, of course, after the occupation of Crimea, a move that is being commemorated right now by this concert in Ukraine. It's coming in Russia, rather, but it's coming at the same time as the war is going on in Ukraine, which makes an event like this, of course, even more important for Vladimir Putin.